Chapter 9. Zack's wrist vibrated, and the display on his luminettes showed that it was his brother calling. "Hey Dylan, what's up?" he asked. "Where are you, bro?" he asked impatiently. "I've been at Luigi's waiting for you, and the staff are getting fed up with me not ordering food. I've only had beer and breadsticks." "Dylan, I'm so sorry. I got distracted. You'll never guess what happened." "Someone broke into my apartment and cleaned me out," replied Zack. "Oh man, that sucks. Want me to come over?" "I've got a better idea. Can you meet me by the old cave in 25 minutes? "It's nearly midnight. Are you sure?" "No questions. Just be there and don't tell anyone." "Okay, bro. I'll just pay the bill and meet you there." It was dark outside, and the slight breeze was cold on his face. Zack put on the balaclava, rolling it like a beanie, and his luminettes adjusted their night vision. As he strolled through the town's streets, he crept through the shadows so as not to attract attention. Turning left down the alleyway after the chick pick takeaway, Zack squeezed through the gap in the fence behind the bins to a backyard away from the security cameras in the main street. Slowly, he made his way to the copse at the back of the houses and blended into the dark of the night. He hopped over the fence and onto Edock Moor, then walked slowly, keeping to the sides so he didn't get caught in the boggy marsh. As he walked, he remembered something from his childhood. He and his best mate Evan had to be rescued because Evan had dared him to jump from one part to another, and as he jumped, he ended up losing his shoes in the gooey mud. Both he and Evan had got well and truly stuck. Thankfully, though, he learned from his mistakes in the past and knew the best parts to walk on. Venturing further towards the cave, he noticed the moon's light getting brighter, and the luminettes adjusted themselves accordingly. Coming up to the cave, the light of the moon was blocked by some trees, and the luminettes turned up to full brightness. Covering the entrance to the cave were signs: "Danger, unstable mine," and "Warning, no trespassing." The metal grid blocking the entrance from the bottom to the top had weathered over the years, but it was still in good standing. In the centre was a door-sized metal grate with a large, sturdy lock attached to it. Zack felt around his pockets for the key that had fallen out of the book's spine and slipped it into the lock's chambers, then turned the key. To his surprise, the lock snapped open and fell onto the floor with a clatter. The sound made him jump, and he turned around to see if anyone was watching him, wondering if someone would spot him at any moment. Nothing moved, no sound, nobody. The surrounding place was silent except for the wind rustling gently in the trees and the sound of crickets. He waited a few moments and, happy with the fact that no one was there, pushed the gate open. It creaked and groaned as he walked into the cave. A noise made his heart beat fast, and he turned his head towards it. Dylan was walking down the road, waving a torch around and humming to himself. "Hey, Dylan," he whispered loudly. "What's up, bro?" He shined the torch up at his brother's face, half blinding him. Zack pushed the torch down gently and told Dylan about the professor's journal as they walked into the cave together. "So you're telling me that Dad is alive?" asked Dylan. "According to this book, yes," replied Zack. He told Dylan about the letter, the timings, and various other things that were more than just coincidence. "Is that why your flat got robbed, bro?" "I think so. And that's why I know there is something about this. Whoever is behind this tried to make it look like a robbery, but the journal mentions the robbery too. It's more than coincidence." Dylan nodded in agreement, pulled an apple out of his pocket and crunched into it. They carried on walking further into the cave. The lack of light in the dark cave meant the luminettes weren't working at full power, So Dylan pulled out the torch, switched it on, and blinded them both as the luminet's light amplification overpowered their eyes. Pointing the torch downwards, Dylan blinked the luminet off, instantly relaxing his eyes, and got accustomed to the dark once more. Bah, I wish they would fix this glitch, said Zack. Sorry, bro, whispered Dylan. The light of the torch flickered around the nooks and crannies of the cave, and as they ventured further in, the surrounding sounds got quieter, as if someone had cupped their ears. Standing still, they bathed in silence for a moment. The rustle of the trees, the wind, and the chirp of the crickets were no longer there. Each step they took forward echoed against the cave walls, as both of them went further into the dark unknown. Dylan regained his senses, and sounds of crunching on gravel and small rocks on the cave floor became louder with every footstep. There was a rustling noise ahead of them, which got louder and louder. No, closer and closer, and Zack ducked just before what seemed like 1,000 bats flew over his head and exited the cave into the midnight sky. Damn, bro, you could have warned me, said Dylan, scraping some bat poop off his jacket. I didn't know that was going to happen, Zack said, silently chuckling to himself. Zack, his heart beating fast with the unexpected bat flyby, caught his breath and leaned down to grab the torch. The walls closed in and narrowed as they walked onward into a carved-out tunnel, with wooden beams, ceilings and walls. The torch picked out the wooden braces, holding up the ceiling and strengthening the walls. Ahead of them, the torch showed a blockage in the tunnel. There had been a cave-in, with lots of boulders blocking the way forward. Dylan looked at Zack. Well, this is a bust. We may as well go back. Thoughts went through Zack's mind. What caused the cave-in? What was on the other side? How would he get to the other side? Wait, I have an idea, said Zack, looking at the professor's journal. What would the professor do? After all, he sent Zack down here, Zack thought to himself. With no other options left, he shrugged his shoulders, tutted to himself, and took the backpack off. Inside the journal, the professor talked about various weird things that Zack didn't understand, and he skimmed those pages, getting through to the map with the numbers. Number 7 was the cave, and a drawing with some rocks on it gave Zack the information he wanted. With the handle of the torch in his mouth, he looked at the text and read it out loud. The first task is hard. To yourself you have to prove that tearing it down is your next logical move. Well, duh. That poem means we have to move the rocks, said Dylan. It seemed obvious, but not exactly what Zack expected. The professor wanted them to go forward, through the rocks. Zack moved the backpack to one side behind him and perched the journal on top of it. Zack wriggled his hands into the leather gloves, and Dylan just tugged at the rocks with his bare hands. They worked together as a team, clearing the rocks from the mound in front of them, to find out what was on the other side. The clatter of each boulder echoed around the cave as they moved each one from the blockage. Although they were small and took relatively no effort to move, it still felt like at least an hour later before there was a big enough hole for one of them to wriggle through. As Zack pulled away the rock he was hiding, Dylan shone the torch through the hole, and the beam of light lit up the other side of the tunnel. Through the small opening in the rocks, he could see that the rest of the tunnel was clear. Zack put the journal in his pocket, then squeezed the rucksack through the hole and slid in through the rocks on his stomach, pushing the rucksack in front of him. Placing both hands on the floor and his chest still laid on the rocks, he pulled himself forwards, scraping his knees and legs on the floor with a thud as he climbed out. After dusting himself off, he walked along the brick tunnel. Looking through the opening at his brother, he asked, "Are you coming?" Yeah. I just need to grab a few more rocks out of the way, and I'll be with you in a moment," replied his brother. As his brother made a larger opening, Zack flickered the torch around. It was the same as before, except the ground had changed from dust and rubble to smooth bricks, each footstep echoing along the tunnel. Dylan squeezed himself through to where Zack was, and they carried on along the tunnel. As they walked, Zack looked at the neat brickwork as the beam of his torch flickered from left to right. Walking further into the pitch black, the floor seemed to become more difficult to see, and what Zack thought was his eyes playing tricks on him suddenly became real as the dark expanse beneath him turned out to be a hole in the floor. Within moments, he felt his legs buckle beneath him as he hit the floor, and gravity took the rest of his body with it. "Whoa, bro! Are you okay down there?" asked Dylan in the darkness. Zack lay on his front. The wind knocked out of him and stayed still, doing a mental check on all his bodily systems. Did anything hurt? Where did it hurt? Could he move? Looking up, he saw the faint light of the tunnel he had come from. "Yeah, I'm fine," came the reply. He moved his head a little, then a few fingers, and his knees, slowly pushing his hands against the floor, rolling himself onto his back. "Stay there. I'm going to get someone to help. I would come down, but if we both get stuck, that's stupid." "Okay, Dylan," called Zack. "I'll be back as soon as possible." Zack listened as more rocks clattered, and he heard Dylan's footsteps getting quieter as his brother walked down the tunnel into the darkness. Zack flicked on the black light torch, and sitting up, he pulled the journal out of his pocket, turning to the page with the map on it. The scratchily drawn map contained some fairly intricate details. He looked closely at the numbers, related to some of the text in the book. Flicking from page to page confirmed that he was right. The numbers were a simple form of a key. 1 was the cave gate, 2 was the lock, 3 pointed at what looked like an entrance to the boundary of what he assumed was Kistowich, as it had a large K in the centre of the square, and some numbers referenced a well, the old Glenbrook Abbey, and more. There were 10 numbers altogether. Zack got up and walked forward to find a way out. A faint smell wafted through the air, and he wondered what it might be. Reading through the pages of the professor's journal, Zack found the next clue. When the road ahead is empty and you cannot clearly see, plunge yourself into darkness, then you can follow me. Zack waved the torch around, but he couldn't see anything. He switched it off, hoping that something might glow, but nothing happened. Great. What am I supposed to do now? He thought. He flashed the torch over the book and read the clue again. The smell was stronger now, and the cereal bar had done nothing for his hunger. Plunge yourself into darkness, he kept repeating, over and over in his head. Plunge, plunge, plunge. Darkness, darkness, darkness. His brain was fried, and his stomach grumbled. He was feeling cold and tired. He couldn't go backward, so the only way was forward. But how? With the handle of the torch in his mouth, he looked through the rucksack and tried to work out what each piece of equipment might be for. Rope. No idea. Black light. Obviously, for reading the diary. Leather gloves. He was already wearing those, and they'd helped him while moving the rocks. Other stuff he hadn't found a use for yet. Creativity flowed, and his brain came up with some weird ideas for the different equipment. He carried on following the map's instructions, and they led him down the small tunnel into a large cavern. As he stepped into the expanse, he could hear drips of water and the echo of his footsteps. And there was also a temperature change as it got noticeably warmer. Looking at the book, he realized the clue wasn't about the darkness of the cave, but the darkness of black light. Pressing the button of the black light, he waved it around and saw a few flecks of glow in the darkness. Yes! He shouted and punched the air. His voice echoed around the cave. Excited, he had found a solution to the clue. He blinked to activate the luminet's low light vision, and the flecks of glow from the black night paint became clearer. The blurred lines he had seen became small arrows as he got closer to them. He followed the arrows on the floor until he came to a wall and spotted the words, "Press here," daubed in paint. With an arrow pointing upward to a curious-looking outcrop of rock. He ambled across the floor and pushed the stone into the wall. A thin beam of light appeared, defining the outside of the stone, and with a click it slid away from him into the wall and then glided upwards, revealing a keypad. Why was there a keypad inside a wall of a cave? He thought. He checked the journal for a code, but only saw another annoying riddle. Hungry you must be, to see the bright blue sky. To proceed, you must now input the first 6 slices of pie. Pie, he thought, as his stomach rumbled. It had felt like hours since he had eaten, and he remembered the second berry pop bar in his backpack. Munching on the cereal bar, he hadn't realized just how hungry he was. The darkness of the cave and the overwhelming flood of that strange smell really messed with his senses. His stomach growled some more. The cave wall shone with a strange swirl of colours, as if the shadows were coming to life. Some small, indistinguishable shapes appeared at first. He squinted his eyes and concentrated, and the shapes became bits of food. First, he saw his favourite chick-pick meal. It was doing a slow waltz with a dinner plate and a carving knife. Then a nice, frosty glass of lemonade, complete with straw, which was juggling ice cubes, and a steaming pie just glowing on the wall with a slice missing. He saw the pie's ingredients, like a giant list. 4 pounds of beef, 3½ cups of beef stock, 1 pound of mushrooms, 1 chopped onion, 1½ cups of flour, 1 egg, and 1 pound of frozen pastry, thawed. The numbers and words moved around. He rubbed his head. It was still sore from the bump when he had fallen through the hole in the floor, but it wasn't bleeding. What was going on? Is he dead, or was he unconscious? He wondered. What was in this cereal bar? Why was he in the cave? What was that smell? Then he saw a shadow, and suspecting someone might be behind him, he turned around, but no one was there. Looking back at the wall, he watched in disbelief as he saw a school tie, a pocket on a blazer, and some white teeth smiling. More features became clearer, and he recognized that the drawing on the wall was of his school friend Darren. Darren opened his mouth and started mumbling. The sort of mumble you hear when you're not listening to someone. Zack focused on what Darren was saying, but it made no sense at all. Then he said something very clearly. Guess what? I know pi to 3.14 slices. Zack's stomach growled as Darren ate the pie. Crumbs fell out of Darren's mouth, and the numbers followed them. Darren picked them up, and he started juggling with the numbers. Zack watched as each number bounced around in circles, and then Darren grabbed the number and hurled it at Zack. The shadows, the weird daydreams, that smell, his senses were completely overwhelmed. Zack fell backwards as if the number had hit him. Sat on the floor, Zack looked up at Darren. The number 3 was about a meter high, and Zack's bookshop knowledge told him the font was probably 1,000 times New Roman. Behind it, Darren was still juggling. It was almost as if there was a sheet of glass between him and Zack, and the meter-long 3 was sticking to the glass. Like a fast bowler, Darren keenly eyed the plate, then pulled his arm up and wound up for the fast bowl. His arm spun around like a helicopter blade, getting faster and faster, and then he let go. The dot of a number grew larger and larger, hurtling towards Zack, and he flinched, expecting the number to break through the invisible window. But it didn't. Instead, it stopped just as before. More and more numbers came one after another. He looked up at Darren and realized 3.1415926. It was pi. It was the value of pi to the first 6 places, not slices of pie. Now he understood. Zack stood up, and instantly the drawing of Darren and all the other things just ran down the wall, as if dripping like wet paint. And just like that, Zack was in the darkness again, with only the light of the keypad to keep him company. He walked to the wall. As he thumbed each button of the keypad, a red light glowed, and then a green glow showed the end of the sequence. With a heavy mechanical clunk, the door unlocked, confirming he had got the correct code. All around him he could hear the clunking sounds of large cogs, grinding and crunching as they turned, and the rock wall to his left slowly moved backwards, spilling dust and dislodging some cobwebs. An enormous spider scuttled its way along the floor. Zack walked into the room as the large rock door slid open, releasing more dust from the cracks in the wall. In front of him was a long passageway which didn't look at all like the cave. Instead, it was an arched brick tunnel, barely 2 feet across and approximately 8 feet high, with strip lights above him. This tunnel reminded him of the places he used to go with his dad on ghost walks when he was a boy. The bottoms of his shoes clicked against the cobbled floor, echoing down the tunnel, and as he ventured further, motion-activated lights flickered on, half blinding him and catching him by surprise. At the end of the bricked corridor, the narrow walls opened up into a larger, more cave-like looking room, with some army-issue backpacks packed with supplies. Attached to the wall near the entrance of the room were some special yellow laboratory-style containment suits. They reminded Zack of the ones he had seen on TV, which emergency services wore after the collapse of the dam to prevent the spread of diseases. Over in the corner was another door, and a big green exit sign brightly lit. He pushed open the door and looked outside, waiting for a moment for his eyes to adjust.